It's worse when we talk about stuff that's been continued out, like, the 8% believe that they're to provide, is it being supported when you come to talking to the supervisor? Yeah. So when you're saying that, when you look at the slide, you don't see the document.
No, yeah, just the
So-
slides.
When you said to me, can you read the example? So what happens is here, there's a block of people. So it like blocks off part of the screen.
You can minimize that.
Maybe
I
I'll
think
do
I
that.
already did it on here, but see, I think it's right here. This would be it.
Okay.
I assume you're in the right place if you're here for a training.
Yeah, we told it was PBI.
There you go.
Abbreviation, I guess.
How are you feeling? I'm good, other than the fact that I've been in the car for 2 hours and 15 minutes. Still. Oh, nice. Excellent. I might have a couple of summers that still have. Most of my clothes.
Yeah, yeah. Me too.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Appreciate it.
I forgot to pull a bottle of water.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Sure. You got another one?
Yeah, I have one in my bag and I have another in my car. And I remembered water, no snack. Figure
I can have a.
Oh, yeah, yeah. 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 Honorable.
So the plan is sometime to get together in February, right?
Yep.
Then showing your trip.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that would be good.
I don't know. That's a good question. But I'm bad. Doing less much stuff. But I'm really. Where are you going? Who told me? New York.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
actually, it's the following week. What, the 12th?
So is the New York, and is that like vacationing or is that?
No, that's with Sam.
Oh, it's all with
Sam.
Sam.
Yeah, do the, we do like elevator. Right, 10:29, one more minute. How about some?
No, Tuesday. I gotta to think about that for a second.
I would do it the last.
Never, yeah. Are you gonna, you're gonna sit?
I'm going to sit here.
We heard it, that's fun.
Oh, I can pick up my,
Thank you.
Alright, make sure. I got
Hello, there we go.
A little delayed reaction.
when I'm being silly, of course. Yeah, it's going, yeah, all right.
So good morning. I see some people hiding behind the pole over there. I'm gonna try to. So thank you for coming. I am Charlotte Stevens. I'll introduce myself and then turn it over to my colleague so she can introduce herself. I am by training a labor and employment attorney. I spent close to 40 years practicing law primarily in the area of labor and employment in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Also did some work in the remaining New England states over the years. Maine, Vermont, and Connecticut. I don't think any in Rhode Island. My practice was primarily management side, so I did a lot of training. At the end of 2021, I retired from a large law firm that I worked for and where I chaired the employment practice group and started a small retirement gig consulting business that was supposed to be part-time, but is maybe a little bit more than that. Kind of like being in the legislature, right? Yeah, it's a part-time, sure it is. And I do these kinds of trainings. I also do investigations, mediation, conflict resolution, that type of thing. So turn it over to Sam.
Good morning, how are you? I'm Sam O'Neill. I am a human resource executive. I've been in human resources in the corporate world for 30 years. Decided that corporate I wanted to change, and I opened my own consulting business, which is Forge Point Solution Group, in the beginning of May. I also do trainings, investigations. I also help small to mid-sized companies with day-to-day HR if they don't have an HR person, and I also do one-on-one executive coaching. And those are the services I offer in my firm.
Great. So if we jump to the first slide, I'm going to give you a little bit of a roadmap of what we're going to talk about today. This is designed to be interactive, so please interrupt us with questions. Feel free to challenge us. This is all about conversation, not about us, quote unquote, lecturing. We're going to talk about the meaning of DEI, and you would think that would be simple, but in this day and age, it is not. So we'll talk about some definitions, because when you start talking about diversity, you always want to make sure that you know what it is that you mean by that. And it can mean many different things to different people. We will review anti-discrimination very quickly. I understand you've already had anti-harassment training, so this kind of dovetails with that, but we're going to hit on some of it. Hopefully, if there are some misperceptions, which there usually are, about discrimination, equity, inclusion, we will help to clarify those. As I said, this is going to be interactive, so we will have some hypothetical scenarios that we review with you, asking for your input. And then lastly, discussing your role as legislators here in creating a welcoming environment, a comfortable environment for each other, for employees who work here and for members of the public who come here for a variety of reasons to do the state's business. We want to make sure that everybody feels welcome and comfortable. Next slide. So we're going to talk about some of the definitions. This is a definition of diversity, which I think many organizations embrace. It was published by the National Multicultural Institute. Psychological, physical, and social differences that occur among individuals. And as you can see, this starts by listing what are the so-called protected classes that Sam will review. I'm sure they're familiar to most of you, if not all of you. But like race, ethnicity, gender, religion, disability. But then it goes on to add additional ways that members of a community, and when I say community, I mean any group, can be diverse. Economic background, cultural background, social background, education, learning styles. So this is a very broad definition of diversity. Next. Equity. Guarantee of fair treatment, access, and opportunity. So what does that mean? It's different from equality, which would be treating everybody exactly the same. Equity is a principle under which there's recognition that some people did not start out with the same advantages that other people do, whether it's based on their having been a member of a protected class, on their socioeconomic background. So the goal is to create a level playing field where people can take advantage of opportunities that are available, whether it is in employment, in education, in public accommodations, whatever it may be. So how can we be fair to people so that everyone can avail themselves of opportunities that are that exist? And next one, inclusion, which is a great word and dovetails with what I mentioned earlier about making people feel welcome and comfortable, creating an environment in which any individual or group will feel welcomed, respected, supported, and their participation in whatever may be happening, whether it's a dialogue, whether it's a class, whether it is testifying before you about a bill, where they feel as though they are welcome, appreciated. Next. This is a graphic that I like. I've been using this one for a couple of years. I haven't found one that I like better. So if anybody has a good one and they want to share it with me, feel free to do that. But talking about the differences among these concepts, and we'll start with equality and equity. Equality is basically treating everybody exactly the same. So in this situation, we have a wooden fence, people trying to watch a soccer game. Everybody gets a box to stand on. In this situation, the little guy gets a box, but he still can't see. So treating him equally has not removed this barrier of the wooden fence. Still can't see the game. So equity, everybody gets the support that they need. So in this situation, the tall guy doesn't need a box. So we take his box, we give it to the little guy. Woman in the middle, she's fine with the one box. Little guy has the two boxes. Now he is on a level playing field with the other two people that are watching the game. Justice is that we've removed the barriers. So now we have a chain link fence rather than a wooden fence. So everybody has equal opportunity to watch the game without any assistance or help at all, because we're in a situation where justice has prevailed and all the barriers have been removed. Okay, any questions? All right, next slide.
So what's going on out there? Nothing, right? There's nothing going on in the world right now, right? So hate has no home here. And that's really what all of this is about, is accepting everybody for their authentic selves and who they are. There's a lot of trends right now, and this list is by no means inclusive. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm not sure this mic is actually working. Okay. Harassment, the Me Too claims, Black Lives Matter, the social justice, the lack of civility, the political disagreements, the war, retaliation claims, concerns about economic stability, mental health in the workplace. And it doesn't matter what your workplace is. It's across all different industries, and mental health has an impact on everybody, regardless of your demographic. The
Can
interesting.
you go back for a sec? I
Yeah,
just
of
want
course.
to kind of touch on a couple things
Yep.
on here. All right, there we go. The issue of retaliation, that's a really important one for people to focus on because the Employment Opportunity Commission is the federal agency which oversees the federal anti-discrimination laws, Title VII, Age Discrimination in Employment Act, Americans with Disabilities Act. And since its inception, the number one basis for claims was race discrimination until about 6 or 7 years ago when retaliation became number one. So it overtook all of the other forms of claims, where now people were, and I'm sure you talked about retaliation in your sexual harassment training, but now what we're seeing is there are still many, many claims of gender discrimination, race discrimination, religious discrimination, but most, if not all, will have a retaliation component. Someone complained, and as a result, they were treated poorly, they were made fun of, they lost their job, they were ostracized. So we really need to focus on eliminating or certainly minimizing that fear of retaliation that people have, because what does it do? It prevents people from coming forward when they have a complaint or a concern. The other thing that I'll quickly mention is the lack of civility. One of the areas that we're seeing that the most these days, and I'm sure you experience it all the time as elected officials, is social media. You know, one of the number one ways that we can see how civility has declined. Read the comments on a news article. Read comments on a Facebook post. Read comments on X or Blue Sky or whatever social media you follow, and you'll see that people have really lost their filters and are able to just sort of go off without really understanding what the impact is on the people they may be talking about. And I've dealt with situations where legislators themselves have engaged in probably what I would consider uncivil discourse over issues of public interest. It's one thing to debate an issue, to talk about an issue, to disagree respectfully, but some of what we see on social media has really kind of gone beyond the pale. Next slide. All right, back to you. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're fine. Yep. So the taboo topics that are taboo in the workplace, you as legislators talk about pretty much every day, right? The abortion, education, guns, immigration, freedom, a lot of the topics that can really have a lot of emotional value, and people have a lot of opinions about them. And the challenge with that is making sure that, you know, while the conversations are healthy and need to take place, because those are the items that you guys are talking about in legislation, is making sure that people are heard, and that even though there's differing opinions, making sure that people are still respectful and professional in the workplace. Even if you don't agree, right? That's saying you're going to disagree. There are so many ways in which to do that, some of which is very respectful and professional, and others are not. And so, you know, going with what Charla said, you know, you have the there's a very different way of communicating when you're talking to somebody face to face versus the behind the keyboard or on social media, right? People can get pretty bold and say things in writing that they typically wouldn't say to people's faces in that professional, you know, conversation. So it's really understanding different points of view and being respectful, even if you don't agree or understand where they're coming from. And it's making sure that regardless of any protected class, regardless of the individual, there's that workplace civility going through everyday communications.
And I did, prior to the election, the recent election, a number of trainings in workplaces and before human resource groups about political discussions in the workplace and how these issues penetrate the workplace. People bring all of this with them when they come to work, all of the hot topics that Samantha mentioned. And one sort of caveat that I heard from another trainer, which I thought was excellent, is to approach conversations from a place of curiosity as to why somebody believes what they believe, as opposed to trying to change their mind. On a lot of those issues, especially the taboo topics, we are very polarized in that it's going to be difficult perhaps to change someone's mind completely, but maybe try to find common ground and gain some understanding of why the person you're talking to feels the way they feel. Back to you.
Okay. So Charla mentioned the protected classes earlier, and these are federal under the EEOC, which is what Charla mentioned before. So we're going to talk a little bit about discrimination, and it's interesting because I've been in HR for 30 years. Charla's been practicing law for longer than that, and all of these categories have evolved over time. When I first started in human resources, it was really age is 40 and above. I had said that in one of the other sessions, and people were like, really? It's 40? Yes, 40 and above, you're in a protected class. Race, color, religion, and now it's expanded to veteran status, marital status, gender identity, etc. And so making sure that in the day-to-day environment where you are, whether it's in an office, a committee, dealing with the public, the media, visitors, or each other, what have you, that you're aware. And it shouldn't mean that you need to be so scared to say something or do something that it cripples you. It's really making sure that you're educated and aware of the individuals that you're talking to. And that's really important. So discrimination, employment or other decisions based on membership in a protected class. So an example for that might be you don't select somebody for a committee because of their race or because of their gender. That would be a discrimination against race or gender, or any other of the protected class that were on the previous slide. Employment or other decisions that are made based on stereotypes or assumptions about a protected class. So an example of that would be if you have a committee relating to technology and you don't want anybody over the age of 50 on that committee because they have no idea what they're doing relating to technology. That's an assumption that because you're older, you're not the state of the art on technology. Denying an opportunity to a person because of marriage or association with an individual of a protected class. So that would be, and I know this is a hiring example, but if you can take the hiring example and listen to the example, you can relate it to interaction with committees, the public, or any other work event. Is if you have, let's just say Charla had a child with a disability, and she was being considered for a role or a promotion or an election. And people knew that she had a child with a disability, and she was not selected because of that, because she wouldn't be able to commit herself because she's going to be at doctor's appointments, or she might have to stay home to take care of her child from time to time, etc. Situations like that is she herself doesn't have the disability, but her child does. So that's where the association ties in. So making decisions surrounding that as well is an example of discrimination. Does anyone have any questions relating that? Yes.
Not a question relating to that, but I'm just wondering if these slides are going to be available after.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, they will
Yes,
be
they will.
emailed to everyone by Human Resources. Yeah.
Was there another hand? Yes.
How do you prove that? I mean, what if she didn't get the job because she didn't have skills or knowledge, and she had a handicap? I mean,
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah. So it's really, you want to select the best person for the job, right? So, in my world, whoops, that's not what I meant to do. So in my world, in human resources, and I'm going to stick with interviewing for just a second, because it's an easier way to describe it for me personally. So hopefully it can resonate with what you're asking, is if I have 5 applicants, when you go through the interview process, you have to be able to prove why you selected the individual that you did, right? So if it was challenged, well, they hired me because I was under 40 and they didn't hire somebody who is over 50 or 60, right? You would have to go through and you would have to be able to prove, you would have to show the job description, you would have to show the resumes, you would have to demonstrate and explain why you made the selection that you did. And so that's how it would be. And you can take that and you can translate it into different scenarios.
Yeah, X has a master's degree and 10 more years of experience, so that would be a, you know, a legitimate basis to make that decision, especially if it was a job requirement. No.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. No, not at all. You would not. So sometimes you know, because like you said, it's visible. It's obvious if somebody is in a wheelchair or, you know, whatever the color of their skin might be. But in this particular scenario, the assumption is the person offered that information but was not asked, or the person maybe knew it from some other source. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Any other questions? Great.
Okay, we're going to go through our first hypothetical. And again, we're staying with the hiring mode, but it can apply to any situation in which you might be thinking of demographics or increasing diversity. And this is, I think, a concept that's important for you folks to know as legislators, because this comes up a lot, where people will say somebody got a job because, or somebody got this assignment because. And, you know, you are looking only at candidates of a particular group because you want more women, you want more people of different religions. So in this situation, Tim and Miguel are the hiring managers looking to fill a number of open positions in the human resources and security departments. In a discussion with managers, the issue of demographics comes up. Tim mentions that they've had trouble recruiting new workers, especially younger workers, and he's concerned that succession planning efforts will be undermined without an influx of new people with new ideas. Is this a problem? I'm seeing some nods. I'm seeing some maybe. Yeah, I mean, if the goal is let's pick only younger people and no older people because we need young people with their new ideas, that would be discriminatory to exclude an entire group of people or say we are only looking at candidates that are X. Now, you may want to say something like, we want to maybe be able to draw from a wider pool. Maybe we're looking in all the wrong places, or, you know, we're not encouraging or finding young people who are interested in applying. And that's certainly valid and an appropriate strategy for trying to increase diversity. But just saying we will not consider anybody unless they are X would be a problem. So put a little more flavor on that one. Would it make a difference if the conversation were around the organization's DEI strategy and the need to hire more Latinx workers to increase diversity? We only want to look at individuals with a Hispanic background, nobody else. Problem? Yeah, problem, discrimination. Okay, let's go, next one. So, you know, when organizations start talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you know, what are the things that, you know, you would like to see happen to make that conversation more healthy, more effective, more successful in creating a workplace that's diverse and where people feel as though they are welcome regardless of their background? Building trust is incredibly important. Often people will question motivation. Why are you doing this? Why are you wanting to talk about this? Are you doing this because, for example, you know, you want good publicity and you want to be able to put on the website that we have a diversity committee? You know, are you genuinely interested in what my feelings are on this topic? So you want to be able to encourage creative conversations, frank conversations, and be able to discuss what's best for the organization. The concept of psychological safety. So what does that mean, psychological safety? It means that people will feel comfortable speaking up, that people will not be concerned that they might be ridiculed or they might be yelled at or ostracized or treated poorly because they have stated an opinion that's different from the majority of the group. So people want to feel safe and not be worried about any adverse consequences, whether it's at work, whether it's in some type of other community or organization. Always want to make sure that you're bringing different voices to the table. Ask people what they want. I used to talk about the law firm that I worked for that had 5 offices. And every one of those offices had a different culture. They were all within an hour of each other. They were in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. You could drive to any one of them from the main office in Manchester within an hour. But every single one of those offices had a different culture. It depended upon who the leader was, depended even on location, who the staff was. There was just, there were different things that people needed. And whenever we had conversations about any topic, especially things like, diversity or advancement or promotions or trainings, wanted to bring everybody in so that you could get ideas from everybody as to what would be beneficial and helpful to them. If it's only the management team that is deciding what's best for everybody else, that's not going to achieve what you would like to achieve in terms of a respectful and comfortable workplace. And learning from each other's differences. Like I mentioned before, approaching conversations from a place of curiosity. Next slide. Of course. The Tim and Miguel? Okay. Yep. Yep. Right. But the concept is the same regardless of what. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Perfect example. Yep. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely not. And like we say, we want to embrace different voices. I think the example was to the exclusion of others, only one. And whether that's to bring people in to testify, although I know that anybody can come in and testify if they want, but people that are invited, concepts, ideas that are invited, absolutely. And we want to embrace different voices. And from the hiring perspective, absolutely appropriate to try to increase the hiring pool. Go advertise in different places, hold a job fair somewhere, that has a more diverse population so that you can increase the pool of applicants, but then make the decision based on ability, training, education. Yeah. Okay, so where do organizations begin? And I mean that, with respect to any organization, having more thoughtful conversations. And this is, and as I said, the first slide, the title of this is where do we begin, not where we end. Our hope and goal is that you do have, as a group, more thoughtful conversations. Involve all stakeholders in the process. If you are trying to talk about diversity here in the State House, who would you want to include? You'd want to include representatives from the House, from the Senate, from the staff, maybe other people who come here, whether it be lobbyists, whether it be members of the public. Who do we bring in to have different ideas and different perspectives? Because what may be great for you may not be great for the staff. And you want to be able to keep that in mind. This is their workplace. This is a workplace for you of sorts, but you also have other lives. But this is their workplace. So things that happen here, if they're not comfortable because they're being treated poorly by one of you or by a coworker, that's their livelihood. That's their mental health potentially. So we want to keep that an open mind about making sure that we include anybody who may have an interest. And then creating the space in which all individuals feel welcome and can be their authentic selves. And when I say authentic self, I don't mean their unfiltered self who says and does anything, their good self, but they should be able to be themselves, not to hide their sexuality or the fact that they have a disabled child or anything else that is part of who they are. People should be comfortable being themselves. All right, next slide.
So, but I didn't mean to offend. How many of you have had a situation where you say something and somebody is offended by it and you're like, that was not my intent. I didn't mean to say that to hurt your feelings or to upset you. Right? I think at some point we all have at some point or another, right? And it's really understanding who your audience is, right? So when and again, this is another example that, whether you're a legislator, a leader in an organization, it all kind of comes true is you have to be aware of who your audience is. And when I do, leadership training, I talk about you have to change how you're communicating based on who your audience is and who the recipient of the information is to make sure that, what you're saying is sensitive, right? And being aware of your surroundings. So, the intent is, what you're saying. The impact is how is the person receiving the information? What is the impact on them, right? And there's lots of times where you don't realize what you said had an impact. And that impact could be positive, it could be negative, but it really influences people. And so looking at what is said and done and who is receiving the information. And one of the challenges that people have is that, it's really up to the person receiving the information. So it's how are they experiencing that? And again, it's not just the verbal conversations, it's also the emails, the text, what's on social media. And it's just being aware of what is being said and the impact of the person receiving the information and being thoughtful of that.
Should I give my example?
Sure. Yes. Oh, your feelings example?
My feelings
Your
example.
feelings, yeah.
Yeah. So very often in these trainings, I use members of my family as examples. They just love it. So I can recall one occasion on which I told my husband that he hurt my feelings. I said, "You hurt my feelings." And he said, "No, you did." "No, I didn't." And I went, "Wait a minute. These are my feelings." Or what's another response that you might get? "I was just kidding, but it's the truth." Okay, but the intent may have been to say something, wrong meeting? Oh, that's okay. The intent may have been to give you what they believe to be some truthful information. The intent may have been to be funny, but when it's not taken that way, that's a problem. And in situations like retaliation or discrimination, it's going to be in the eyes of the recipient that whoever a fact finder is who is going to look at it. And sometimes it's really hard to know if you've offended somebody. I mean, if you've ever stood around in a circle and somebody's told an inappropriate joke and, everybody laughs and some people go, you can take cues from people's body language, from what they say, but we want to empower people to be able to tell you, for example, a staff member, to tell you if you've offended them. You want to know if you've offended somebody. I assume 99% of us would want to know that. So we want to empower people to say that and to be able to say it without retribution.
And that ties into the safe place, right? If people feel safe and respected, they're more apt to say, "Hey, I didn't like that joke," or, "You offended me," or, could you have said it this way instead? And I think that's really, it all comes full circle. If people feel that they're respected and feel that they're safe, then you have a more, people will speak up a little bit more if something doesn't sound right. To give another example, I did a racial investigation for a client a couple months ago, and people were telling jokes and things like that, and this individual was laughing. So they thought that he found it funny. And at the end of the day, he didn't find it funny. He found it offensive, but he didn't know how else to react. And he didn't feel that he was in a safe enough place to say, "Hey, knock it off. I find that offensive." And so in looking into that situation, it was more education. We needed to make people more aware, as opposed to they weren't being discriminatory per se. They needed to be more aware of their surroundings and of his feelings and how people were saying things that they thought were funny and at the end of the day were not at all. So a lot of it is education, because people don't come in to work or whatever, you're thinking, "Oh, I'm going to go get Sam today. I don't like her. I don't like something about her. So I'm going to wake up today and I'm going to make her life, miserable today. That's not the intent of people, right? There's no,
Or maybe
lots
a
of
few
times
people.
it's not, well, maybe, being HR and all, perhaps, I don't know. But it's not typically a reasonable person's intent to do that, but it's really awareness and making people feel safe and respected.
Okay, I think it's me next, right? Yes. So these are really important concepts to differentiate between because they often get conflated, bias and bigotry. People treat them as though they're the same. We all have bias. Sometimes it's bias in favor of something or someone or some group. Sometimes it's bias against it. I think a lot of times when people hear the term bias, they get offended and think that you're accusing them of bigotry or intolerance. That's not the case. We all have that. Comes from our cultural upbringing, our family life, our education, what we've been exposed to in the workplace or in social circles in which we participate. All of that builds up to make you you and create some type of bias, which can be overcome. I have given the example of when I was first a new partner in my law firm, I found that I was giving more assignments to young female associates. And I realized, wow, you're working with 90% women. And I tried to say, well, why are you doing that? Is it, they asked for the work, or, as a more senior woman, I felt it was my responsibility to help them and mentor them, or I was more comfortable with them. We had more in common. And if I was going to be spending time with them, long drives and, hours working on cases, maybe I was looking to try to find somebody more like myself to spend time to. We all kind of gravitate towards people that are like us. I did an unconscious bias training once where I was a participant, and they asked you to, list your circle, the 4 people you would most likely go to if you had to talk about something or if you had a problem. And, most of them were women that were over the age of 50, that were similar in terms of education, socioeconomics. That was my circle for the most part. And then you realize, yes, you gravitate towards people that you are more similar to. And I had to sort of overcome that and say, no, there are guys that want to do employment law, so let's try to include them. And, I kind of worked it out, by myself, but there are situations where that doesn't get worked out. And, for a long time, a discrimination can get perpetuated, and the lack of opportunity can get perpetuated if people aren't looking at things from a different light. Bigotry is different. Bigotry is intolerance, it's prejudice, it is, glorifying or advancing your own group, whatever it might be, gender, race, religion, to the exclusion or the detriment of others. We're better than you for X reason. That would be bigotry. And of course, that would be very wrong and much more difficult to overcome. So, next slide. All right, this is just a little wordle of some terminology that you will often see in the DEI world. And many of these words are new to people at different times. Many of them were new to me when they first started to become part of the lexicon, and I had to sort of educate myself, look them up. I thought it would be helpful to review a few of them. So let's go to the next slide. So ally, this is a term we have used often in the context of, discrimination, racial discrimination, religious discrimination, sometimes gender discrimination, where a person, is opposed to or takes some type of action to weed out or address discrimination, oppression, not being a member of the group that's being discriminated against or oppressed. So someone else who is a friend, an ally, and speaks up to try to weed out or stamp out that type of discrimination or negativity against a group. I recently did an article on being a mental health ally at work, so it can be used in many contexts, and I focused on things like, if you know someone is struggling with a mental health issue that you're working with, how do you get them to resources? How do you make them comfortable speaking up? Maybe you go to human resources with them, or maybe you try to find, some type of resource for them in the community, which would be confidential. Speaking up on behalf of someone or helping someone out with an issue with which you are not involved. Cultural competence is talking about the organization or an individual's knowledge, ability to communicate, address, deal with, help people of different cultures. And I'm going to suppose that often you will have people of different cultures come before you at the legislature. And it first came up, or I first heard of it in the context of medical treatment. I was on the board of directors of a low-income medical clinic. In that community, we had many refugees, large refugee population, came from essentially camps where, they'd not seen refrigerators or stoves. So they were in a cultural desert when they came to Manchester, New Hampshire. It was very difficult for them to adapt, but they had children who got sick and they brought them to this clinic. And very often they would be using home remedies that they had learned, through their own family. It was the way they had been treated when they were sick. And the nurses, physicians had to really learn how to talk to these people and to provide service to the children without insulting these home remedies that these people had grown up with, and not saying, that's silly. Why would you put a poultice on that? We can give you an antibiotic and it will take care of it. And, you have to be very careful when you're dealing with someone of another culture to make sure that you are not insulting them, that you're not looking down on them, while also being able to provide what the service is that they need. And that's where that term first came to, and this was like probably 20 years ago, first came to my knowledge. Next slide. Implicit bias, we talked about that a little bit when we talked about bias. Implicit bias is sometimes referred to as unconscious bias. They're usually, in this context, negative associations that you might hold unknowingly. You might not realize that you have a bias against or for X, Y, and Z, just like I didn't realize that I seem to have a bias for the female associates. They're somewhat automatic. It's not a conscious decision to discriminate against someone. There have been many, many studies on the science in the brain around implicit bias, and also in the way that they affect individuals. So they might have real-world implications on somebody's mental health, on somebody's self-confidence, on somebody's ability to succeed in a certain environment if they are treated differently, whether it's unknowing or not, than other colleagues or co-workers or friends or whatever it might be. Okay.
So fostering a respectful workplace. So this morning, actually, I saw on my LinkedIn feed results of a Gallup survey. So Gallup is one of those national survey for workplace, and you can get a lot of information from that. And one of the things that I read it twice because I was like, wow, really? 37% of workers feel that they're respected at work. 37%. I was like, wow, that is a low number. And it's across industries, it's across demographics. So it wasn't like a specific industry or anything.
Like the legal profession.
It was exactly, or HR or whatever. It was across the industries. I just found that really fascinating and kind of sad actually as well, because people come to work with the expectation of being respected. And so, so really, what does that mean? And respect, I think the tolerance of respect is a little bit different, right? Depending on who you are and what your own expectation is. But at the end of the day, regardless if, you don't agree with somebody or you don't understand them or you have different beliefs than they do, you still want to, or you know what, even if you don't like them, you still want to treat them respectfully and kind and professionally. I remember when I first started an organization, I won't tell you which one, but it was like day 2 and I had a staff of 20 something and I got in the office and I walked around and I said, good morning to everybody. Something I do all the time, didn't even think anything of it. A little while later, one of my new team members came into my office and she was like, thank you. I'm like, thank you for what? She's like, for saying good morning to me. I'm thinking, wow, really? Like I felt awful. And then I thought, oh my God, what did I just get myself into? Like what kind of environment is this that people aren't even saying good morning? And she had tears in her eyes. And for her, good morning really, it really hit her. And so, you know, I wanted to make sure that we change that within the workplace. And that's something small, but at the end of the day, it's really big. Sometimes those little things, the good mornings, the thank you, the have a good weekends, it's small, but it goes a long way. So, you know, what is workplace civility? It's positive behavior that produces feelings of respect, dignity, and trust among members of an organization. And there's that word trust again, right? It's trust, it's safety, it's respect. And if people feel that they are treated well, what do you think happens? Whether it's work or on a committee or on a sports team for that matter. Others will,
Yep.
right? But they also feel more engaged, more
Try harder.
you know, you try harder, you put 100% in perhaps, as opposed to, oh, it's just a checkbox. I'm going to work today, or I'm going to sit on this committee today, right? You care more a little bit and you're engaged more because you feel that you're being heard and you're in a safe place and you're trusted. Demonstrated through manners and courtesy, which we just talked about, and avoid conduct that's offensive, rude, demeaning, or threatening. Some of the small things like that really make a big difference. Threatening is not a small thing. That is a big thing. I had someone who talk about retaliation. Somebody came forward with a complaint and somebody else found out that they complained and basically said, you're going to get yours. That's not okay. Everybody should feel. So do you think that that person might come forward again if they have a concern or complaint? Probably not, right? So those are things that actually happen day to day. And so it's really taking stock of being thoughtful, being respectful. Again, so many different beliefs. The topics that you talk about on a daily basis are so sensitive, and they bring up a lot of various emotions. And just because you agree to disagree, or you might not believe or understand something, it's still making sure that in the top of your mind that you're still treating people with kindness and civility and respect and professionalism.
Okay, Sam has a stutter. At committee meetings, when Sam reports to the group about the status of his projects, Walter will interrupt him and say things like, "We can't understand you." Or he'll restate what Sam said. What you're really trying to say is, Sam's never said anything about it, and others in the meeting have said nothing. Anything wrong with this? So, what do we call that? Bullying? Yeah. I mean, I think it's bullying, it's incivility, it's rude, it's disrespectful, all of the above. Any strategies on what you might do if you were a participant in the meeting, or maybe the head of the committee who was running the meeting? How would we address that? Yeah. Yeah. Right. And then sometimes people might think you condone it if you don't say anything. Yeah. So you're talking about going to Sam with that to say, can we help? Yeah. And what if he says, "No, I'm fine"? Then it's fine, right? I think that's it. You first, and then you. In addition to, right, right. So Yeah, and Sam should, if he is not looking for an accommodation, we take Sam as he is, and we're not trying to fix him. We're trying to, give him the opportunity to present in a way in which he's comfortable. And I know you had your hand up, so you and then you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, let's talk to Walter. And, you don't have to embarrass Walter any more than you want to embarrass Sam. But, maybe it's an offline conversation to say, hey, you're kind of hard on Sam. Maybe you want to say something different, or maybe you don't want to say anything at all. Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
I was just thinking, depending on the level of immediate tension that was.
Yeah.
It may really offer something to be taken in the moment, such as, well, maybe if we just did some time,
Exactly.
then
Yeah.
we'll all follow without.
Perfect. And you would hope that whoever's chairing the meeting would do that. If they don't, that's an example of allyship to step up and say, let's give Sam the opportunity to finish his thought. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
You can prove it in the conversation with Walter, like the we cannot, maybe Walter cannot. And the difference between speaking on behalf of a group of people.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
there's- Walter do is appoint himself.
Spokesperson for the group. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, exactly. I love that one. I may use that one. All right, next slide. I'm going to get you out in time, and we have a few more topics we have to cover.
So creating respect and civility in your workplace, we talked about some of these things already. I think one of the things that we really didn't talk about is the see something, say something, and being mindful to address problem behaviors. So what happens if there's an issue and you don't say anything and you would ignore it? What happens? It gets worse. It doesn't go away. As
Yeah,
much as we
remember,
hope
like,
it would go
ignore the
away.
bully and it'll go away?
Yeah, it just
They
gets
never did.
worse. Yeah. Yes.
Curiously, so what if you've done everything to try to address the issue? So you've provided feedback, you've listened to individuals, and it's just kind of like a continual,
Yep.
continual thing, and behavior doesn't change. And any strategies for?
Well, I think at that point, if you've tried everything, in a respectful way, the next step is to kick it up to the next level, whether that be, and we'll talk about, the policies around who you report to, but, if it's a staff member, it might be, you go to human resources. If it is, a member of the house, you might go to the house ethics panel. I mean, I think, if somebody is really behaving badly and, the conversations and those strategies have not helped, it really has to get escalated to another level. Ready for the next slide? I think we're talking about, oh, okay. So diversity reflects differences within a group. So you want to be careful about, for example, referring to a person as diverse. He's a diverse candidate. And we hear it all the time. Individuals are not diverse, groups are diverse. Equity, as we mentioned, fair treatment, equality in access to opportunities, inclusion, making sure that people feel valued as members of a group and part of the team. And that includes staff. I know these are very mixed groups with, lots of different backgrounds, lots of different levels of education and experience. You have very young staff that work in these buildings. And so you have to be mindful of that. Next slide. Avoiding assumptions about what people of different backgrounds can or like to do. One example of that I give is sometimes, female applies for a promotion. She has a new baby at home or two small children. The assumption is, "Ugh, this job's got a lot of travel. She's not going to want to travel, so we're going to give the job to the single woman or the single male, someone else. She's deprived of an opportunity, and she didn't have the ability to weigh in on whether or not she wanted or was able to travel as that job required." And I think we've covered all of this. So let's jump to the next one. So microaggressions, important topic, wherever you may be, whether it's a workplace scenario, whether it's someplace like where you are here, in the legislature, whether it's out in the public, in your social groups. It's a comment or action that subtly, often unconsciously or unintentionally expresses a prejudice attitude. I like to call it death by 1,000 cuts. It's like if it happens once, maybe it may not be a big deal. You can laugh it off, you can ignore it. But if it continues, like you say, if it's repetitive behavior, then it can really start to have an impact on someone. So let's give some examples. Next slide. Oh, no, I got a survey result first. There we go. SHRM is a Society for Human Resource Management. It's the largest sort of trade association, professional association for human resource professionals. It's a global organization. They do a number of different surveys. When people have come before you with employment issues, they may have, bills with employment issues. They may cite SHRM. Their survey found that 26% of the adults they surveyed had definitely experienced a microaggression at work. 36% they had said they had witnessed one, and 22% were not sure, which is kind of puzzling. So let's go to the next slide. I was doing a training a couple of months ago for a board of directors of an organization, specifically on microaggressions, because that had been a problem with this group. And so I found an article in Harvard Business Review, the top 10 microaggressions to avoid. And having learned that at least 5 of them had been used by this board of directors, I decided this was a great article to cite for them. So here are some examples. Saying a Black person is articulate or well-spoken. I think we can remember when Barack Obama was running for president, people were saying, "Oh, he's so articulate. He's such a good speaker." Like it was a big surprise that a Harvard-educated lawyer would be articulate. So, that if you hear that a few times, that starts to get to you. Claiming to be colorblind or saying you don't see black or white. Now, you can say you're not prejudiced. You can say that you're not a racist, but to say I don't see gender, I don't see color, that's just it's. People don't accept that as real. People find that disingenuous because we all see all of those things. And we want people to see all of those things because we want to be viewed as who we are, not as some homogeneous group. Asking Black men and women if they went to college on an athletic scholarship, as if that would be the only way they would get into whatever the university might be. Stating we need younger people. If you're an older person, that can get to you after a while. It's like, we need some more young people around here. Asking where someone's originally from, especially if they have features of particular racial or ethnic group. Where are you from? New York. No, where are you really from? Where are your people from? I'm from New York. Stating a woman is too emotional to be a leader. So what does that mean? Yeah, that's a biggie. That's a biggie. And I think I talked a little bit about, having come to New Hampshire in 1984, there were not many female attorneys at the time. And so there became certain trigger words that would kind of set us off, and emotional was always one of them. The other one was commitment. I don't know if she's really committed to the firm. Well, what does that mean? She picks up her kid at daycare, so she's not committed to her career. Like, what if you have problems with her work, be specific about what those problems are. Don't kind of use those words. You're too emotional. Why is she too emotional?
Sensitive is another one.
Yeah.
Women are too sensitive.
Yeah, you need to develop a tougher skin. Asking a woman if you can touch her hair, or a pregnant woman if you could touch her belly. Using terminology which brings in mental health. We've all done it. I will say I have more than once referred to a psycho client or a psycho opposing counsel. I'm not proud of it. But saying things like, he'll go postal. He looks like he could go postal any day. The weather is bipolar. If you're saying that where, people who may have mental health issues are overhearing it, or may have a child or a family member with mental health issues, probably best not to use that kind of terminology. Using outdated terminology with racial undertones, like let's call a spade, and then dismissing complaints as misunderstandings. He didn't mean to offend. That's just Joe being Joe. He talks to everyone like that. Here's a few others that I have specifically had to address or dealt
Darla,
with.
wait, there's a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. 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 Right. Oh, to have your hair braided or, yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah. Did you use a straightener? Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's a really good, I appreciate that. That's a good example. So assuming a Latino coworker is an immigrant complimenting their English speaking. His last name is Velez, so boy, you speak really good English. Asking only women and or younger staff to order lunch, take notes, pick up. Oh, I think I meant to say coffee in there. Typo, gotta fix that. Asking women to do the housekeeping type chores, or asking young people to sort of be gophers or women to be gophers for you, inappropriate and probably a microaggression. Accusing women of color, you women or people of color of being too angry or aggressive when the same behavior is viewed positively in white men. Young female attorney, if I was aggressive or assertive, I was the B word, where, a male might be looked at as a tough lawyer, tough litigator, really held to a different standard. And so hearing that can be problematic. Telling women they should smile more. You look so serious all the time. You look unapproachable. If you smiled more, maybe people would feel more comfortable coming and talking to you or coming into your office to ask you questions. Anybody have any others? You mentioned a good one. Okay. Leroy. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Everyone makes it different, right? I mean, if you don't relax a little more, we can all smile a little bit.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I think that, let's everybody calm down. Let's take a minute. And yeah, I think that's fine. If it's a kind of a general, things are getting heated, let's take a beat. Yeah, totally appropriate. It's more the targeting of a particular person or group. Yeah.
So another example of that, which is an office example, but and it happened to me. So I was a chief HR officer, and my fellow C-suite were all white men, and I was the youngest and the only female, and I was asked to take minutes in a meeting. And I said, I'll do it this time, but we're going to rotate. There were 4 of us. It's not like it was a big thing, but we're going to rotate because I'm not going to be the only note taker. And then 2 of the 3 of them came and apologized to me after because they realized how it came across. But again, I felt safe to say something, and I've learned over my career to be bold enough to say something where before I wouldn't say anything and I would just let it go. And so it's taking those situations and being aware of them.
Okay, I know that we're out of time, so I'm going to finish up with this one, and then you folks will get the slides, which has the policy and who you contact if you have an issue to report. Leroy and Mike are the only 2 African-American employees in the department. Their manager consistently calls them both Leroy. They laugh it off and joke about it at first, but after a couple weeks, they get frustrated and go to the department director to complain. Do we have a problem here? Yeah. So what do we have? Microaggression, maybe even more. Yeah. Sort of rudeness, Like, you can't bother to learn people's names. And I will tell my story about this. Law firms are also great for having great examples. There were two women in my law firm that were probably there like 10 years before me. So we're talking like, they got there in the 70s. And they were the first two female associates, and the senior partner took to calling them the blonde on the first floor and the blonde on the second floor. And like 30 years later, that was like, office lore and legend. But the reality is these two women looked nothing alike. One was in real estate, one was in litigation. And then it became a joke where other people started calling them that. So, and so much so that they told the story 30 years later at like a conference when they were speaking together. A problem for him to do that and her, because there was a female senior executive that did the same thing, and not bother to learn their names, and then for other people to perpetuate it by joking about it. Real problem. Okay, we can skip over that. That's just another graphic. You can look at it when you get it. Rights are not pie. There's plenty to go along for everyone. And these are the policies, not the policies, but the references to the policies. House policy on the prevention of discrimination covers House members and all staff in all of the buildings, all covered by the same policy. The conduct of a House member is at issue. Whoop, can you go back for a second?
Sorry.
You would go to the panel for prevention of discrimination, not the ethics committee, that's the Senate. Or you would go to, for a staff member, the Department of Human Resources. And next one, if the Senate does not have a freestanding policy on discrimination prevention, however, discrimination is considered to be conduct unbecoming of a senator. So you would go to the Senate Ethics Panel or the Office of the Secretary of the Senate. And I believe that is all we have. We're happy to stick around for questions, but I am sure you all have someplace you need to be, because I know you're on really tight schedules, which is why they gave us only an hour. Appreciate your participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.